Welcome, Pewter Report readers and listeners, to another edition of the Pewter Nation podcast. I haven't done this in a long time.
Yeah,
John's
you even forgot the name.
What did I call it? Did I call it Pewter Nation?
The former podcast name.
The podcast formerly known as the Pewter Nation podcast.
Well, now it's just the Pewter Report podcast. Sorry about that.
Exactly right.
My mistake. Clearly, we are the looks of the operation. Scott and John have been suspended until tomorrow. I think they'll be back tomorrow. There's something in your lap, Taylor.
Not sure I wanted to give Dewey some airtime. I did it for the Cats. I promised him one appearance.
Matt, can we go ahead and just delete him out of the stream? Yeah. We're not doing a pet podcast.
All right, Dewey. You're out.
Matt does another pet podcast, but we'll talk about that another day. Okay. Anyway.
I'm actually...
Yeah, we'll talk about it another day. We'll share some of the other endeavors that you do. We're going to talk about on this podcast. Obviously, we're going to talk free agency, as that's kind of the big thing that's coming up. I know that Scott and John have been previewing position by position and things like that. We've started our Pewter Report previews and our best bets. We'll talk about that some, but mainly what we want to do is we want to answer your questions. We just want to have a discussion. This is kind of an open dialogue podcast today. So whatever you guys have on your minds, send your questions in now, and we'll be happy to answer them. If we don't know the answer, we will make something up that sounds fairly reasonable. But anyway, and guys, just to let everybody know, of course, as always, our good friends at Celsius is the title sponsor of the Pewter Report podcast, and we've all got our Celsius here, except Matt. Matt's got his too. What flavor is that? I have to drink
one before every pod.
What? You guys both have pink cans. Why don't I have that?
Strawberry dragon fruit.
No,
yeah,
delicious. Yet.
First time having
one of my favorite.
Delicious.
Very good. Well, let's take a quick look at our sponsor, Celsius, and we'll be back to talk free agency and answer all of your questions on the Pewter Report podcast. I always take my headphones out when that commercial comes on. It's when I listen to it.
It's good.
When I listen to it back on, when I download it, because I get the Pewter Report podcast downloaded to my phone through iTunes, and I like to listen back to them, especially if I haven't been on them. The volume's good, but just in our earphones on this, anyway. Maybe it's just mine. Maybe it's not. But anyway, Celsius, of course, a great sponsor of the Pewter Report podcast. Multiple flavors. You guys have all of your favorites. I'm just an orange guy. I mean, that's what I dig, and that's what I've been drinking lately. In fact, that's what I have here right now, and I'm going to pop it open. And have a sip live on the air.
There we go. How is it?
All over my mustache, but delicious. And the best thing about it is, look, I used to like sodas. It was one of my guilty pleasures in life. Doctor told me no more sodas, Mr. Cook, especially things with sugar. So Celsius has been a great replacement. If you're one of an old guy like me that the doctor says you need to cut down on your sugar to watch your health and things like that, Celsius is a great alternative because it's going to give you that kick, that caffeine that you're used to. I'm not a coffee drinker, so I would use a soda to kind of be my coffee. But anyway, Celsius gives you that without all of the bad stuff in it. There's not any phosphoric acid in a Celsius. You can't pour a Celsius on your battery terminal in your car and eat the corrosion off of it if it doesn't start. That's,
Zero isotopes.
That's what you can do with dark cola. So anyway, great product. Check it out. You can go to Amazon. You can order the multiple flavor packs if you're not sure which flavor you like. I've seen them at Publix. I was at Wawa recently in line, saw them there. They're all throughout the Tampa Bay area, really throughout the nation. Scott was in Kansas visiting his daughter a couple weeks ago and found Celsius. So anyway, wherever you are, check it out. If you can't find it in your local store, you can certainly go to Amazon. We've got banners up. You can purchase the Celsius direct and get a great deal on Celsius. Anyway, fellas, let's talk some football because that's what people care about. They care about Celsius too. But let's talk a little bit about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, we've started our free agency previews. We started with quarterbacks and running backs earlier this week. And we've got the offensive line just came up today, Taylor. People, and again, we just published that about 30 minutes ago. So people may not know, what our thoughts were on the offensive line. And again, Scott and John have touched on the positions, and we'll continue to do that between now and when the free agency kicks off officially on the 15th with the legal tampering period, and then the 17th at 4 o'clock when the doors open for teams to sign players. But just briefly, Taylor, talk a little bit about the offensive line, some of your impressions, some of the guys that are free agents, and let's talk about that best bet that you came up with, or that we came up with as a group when we were trying to figure out exactly who might be a best bet for the Buccaneers to sign if they are going to add an additional offensive lineman. And I think we all think that they will. We saw them with A.Q. Shipley last year, also Joe Haig. Both those guys probably gone. Haig maybe not so much. He could be brought back as that extra offensive tackle / tight end / come in a pinch situation. Shipley's done because of an injury. He's probably going to be on this coaching staff. But sorry, go ahead and talk a little bit, Taylor, about your preview. And we've got some questions rolling in. Just a reminder, this is a Q&A for the listeners, so make sure you get your questions in. You don't even have to super chat. You can super chat. We'd love the donation, but you don't even have to. We're going to try and get to as many of your questions as possible over the next 40 minutes. But anyway, Taylor, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Bucs are really lucky heading into 2021. All of their 5 starting offensive linemen are under contract. So the only free agents, and people might not realize this, I don't know how they feel about the performance in 2019. I think we all saw a much improved offensive line, and that wasn't just the addition of Tristan Wirfs, who in his own right, as a rookie, immediately proved that he's one of the premier tackles in the league already, played 20 games for the Bucs, started them all, on the way to a Super Bowl victory in year 1. What a ride for him it's been. For the last really 40 years, getting drafted by the Bucs was not the best day of your life, other than the fact that you were being drafted. But all 5 of those starters are under contract. The only free agents they have are all depth pieces. That's Joe Haig, that's A.Q. Shipley, as you mentioned, that's Josh Wells, and that's Aaron Stinney. Now, the interesting part about this is largely for the majority of the season, Aaron Stinney was not even an active player. So when you look back at what they have to replace, it's not much if they bring back Haig, if they bring back Stinney, if they bring back Wells. Now, I think Stinney, he's the only restricted free agent of the group. That gives the Bucs a lot of freedom to bring him back. I think he has more than earned a spot to be back. Coming out of James Madison, I think it was. Coming in, stepping in, and playing phenomenally over the last 3 games of the season, en route to a Bucs Super Bowl victory. I like to think Josh Wells will probably be back. He probably won't be overly expensive. You know that Bruce Arians likes to keep his guys. He's had 2 years in this offense. He made 2 starts in 2019, 1 start this year. I think he will probably be back and remain that spot starter at tackle. I think Stinney will probably be back, be that spot starter at guard. And then even A.Q. Shipley. Even A.Q. Shipley is going to come back despite a season-ending injury. He's probably going to come back on the coaching staff. So I think Haig is really the one guy that might be the odd man out. But even then, we saw him struggle at guard. But as long as Stinney's healthy, he can step in. Haig still played 72 snaps at tight end when they move into that jumbo package. Bruce Arians loves to do that. So I think he might be the least likely of those 3 to come back. He still probably comes back. And the only probably big shakeup we could see, and I still think it's a long shot, we've probably talked about it before on the podcast, is releasing Donovan Smith. He's due $14.25 million next year. The Bucs can get out from under that with no dead cap penalty. But again, you're not going to cut him. It's so hard to find.
No chance.
Well, I know that's been a conversation. It's one, the Bucs are still in win now mode. If they were rebuilding, maybe that's an option. But again, they don't know how long they have Tom Brady, only guaranteed for the next season. They're going into win now mode, capable and above. I don't care what you think about Donovan Smith. I know a lot of people have come around on him this past season. It is hard to find a capable, average, and better tackle on the free agent market. It's not going to happen at left tackle. So that's the only made could happen, and we all agree it's probably not going to.
No, and we've got a question real quick. Has Stinney had any training at center? I don't know that he has for sure, but I would certainly expect all the guards have had some training at center because it's, a position they're semi-familiar with. Their build, their athletic ability fits more than, say, going out to tackle, in other words, or a tackle coming in to play guard. It's more closely, intertwined. Again, I don't know for sure that he's done that, but it would make sense because the Buccaneers are limited at the center position. There's just really not anybody that they know that they could count on behind Ryan Jensen, and they certainly don't want to be in a situation where if Jensen were to go down with an injury next year, that they have to move Ali Marpet over. Ali is just a very dominant left guard right now in the NFL, and they don't want to disrupt that at all. So I think certainly, and John and I, we were all discussing it last night on the group chat, that they're going to probably find a center out there. Now, the guy that we picked, I don't know that they're going to be able to afford. He fits the mold. David Andrews, former Patriot, snapped the ball to Tom Brady, 2-time Super Bowl winner. He may command a lot more money than people are thinking right now. I mean, there's some guys out there that are average centers that Spot Track and some of these other services are estimating are going to get between $8 and $10 million. I mean, that's Ryan Jensen money out there for some of these free agent centers. So, I don't know that they can afford him, but here's an opportunity where the Brady effect could affect free agency as well. Maybe a guy like Andrews can't wait to be back here and make another run for a Super Bowl. It just depends on what kind of offers he has out there. But he certainly he's going to command a lot more money than AQ Shipley did when the Buccaneers brought him in late in I guess training camp last year. There wasn't a preseason. So Andrews is our guy that we have as the best bet. Certainly, we could have easily just said Stinnie, right? Because, I mean, that's a no-brainer. He's coming back. Restricted free agent. The Buccaneers hold all the cards. He'll be back and played very, very well in those 3 games that he was able to play in the playoffs. But we had to we went out on a limb a little bit and went with Andrews. Matt?
Yeah, I just want to comment real quick. Just listen, depth is important at every position in football. But, I mean, you look back at last season, and the depth on the offensive line was so crucial to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We already highlighted what Stinnie did in the postseason. When Ronald Jones had that 98-yard touchdown run against Carolina, that was with AQ Shipley in the lineup. I mean, Haig almost had a touchdown in the Super Bowl. So I think
inches
more than anything else,
being a hero.
Yeah, right? That would have been quite the storyline ending right there. And as you said before too, Taylor, he also played a lot, in that extra blocker lining up next to the tight end. So more than any other position, offensive line cannot be overlooked when it comes to the depth, because on the flip side of it too, in that Super Bowl, the Bucs playing the Chiefs were cocky and thought, we can get away with having 2 backup tackles. And then we saw how the Bucs defensive line absolutely annihilated the offensive line. So that's a big thing to think of.
In games that the Buccaneers lost this year, I mean, I'm thinking particularly of that Saints game on Sunday Night Football. That offensive line was a mash unit. They had guys all over the place because of injuries. So, certainly when they have their 5 guys starting, they were the 7th ranked. I guess PFF had them as the 7th best unit. Was it 7th best last year, Taylor? I know that it was in your preview.
It was 7th best after 2019, 5th best per PFF. Last year.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I think they played particularly well, especially after the bye week. I think things really came together for these guys, and I've mentioned it on the podcast before, and even in the Bucs Monday mailbag that I think we really got to tip our hat to Harold Godwin and Joe Gilbert, who did a tremendous job. I mean, for whatever reason, George Warhop couldn't get these guys playing as well as Godwin and Gilbert did over the last 2 years. Now, last year, while they were ranked a little bit higher than I think the eye test says, they weren't really a cohesive unit completely last year, but this year they really came together. And again, a lot of that is you don't want to be the guy that gets Tom Brady killed. I mean, you just don't. I mean, you don't want Jameis Winston hurt. You don't want Mike Glennon hurt. You don't want Josh McCown hurt. But you really, really don't want to be the guy that gives up a sack that knocks Tom Brady out for the entire season. So I think he elevated the play of that offensive line to a degree, just based on the fact that they don't want to be the weak link on that unit, and everybody kind of stepped up their game. Speaking of offensive line, and we'll get to your question real quick here, Kevin, in just a second. I actually had lunch yesterday with DeMar Dotson, former Buccaneer, of course, ended up getting cut. You talk about now. We all talked about Lavonte David and Mike Evans and Will Golston being these longtime Buccaneers and finally getting a ring. Man, what a bummer for a guy like DeMar Dotson. I go back to that 2002 Super Bowl for the Buccaneers when Warrick Dunn leaves that year. Dave Moore leaves for a year, comes back to the Buccaneers, but both those guys were valuable contributors to the Buccaneers and part of playoff teams, but never got that Super Bowl ring. And I hate it for DeMar Dotson, who's actually going to be a guest on the Pewter Report podcast in the next couple weeks, and he's got some very interesting things to say about the Denver Broncos. But one thing I do want to say that he brought up to me yesterday that we can talk about now is he loves Tristan Wirfs. You wonder, it's got to, eat at him a little bit, right? The team decides he's, not needed anymore, and we're going to go draft a young kid. But DeMar is a classy guy, and he told me he watched the first game that the Buccaneers played this season against the Saints, and he saw Tristan Wirfs go up against Cam Jordan and some guys, and he said right then he knew this guy was going to be special. He said, man, he's got a great base. He's extremely athletic. I mean, all of those traits popped on the screen to DeMar Dotson, who didn't know anything about Tristan Wirfs before that game. And Tristan Wirfs proved to be the most dependable offensive lineman, really, across the board as a rookie, starting every snap or playing every snap the entire offensive season and giving up just one sack all year, which is, DeMar was just blown away. He says that's so hard to do, and to do it as a rookie without the training camp that he had was even more impressive, DeMar said. But we're going to have DeMar Dotson on the podcast.
And I think that really speaks to your point about Joe Gilbert and Harold Goodwin and how much – now, I can't remember – I want to say – I have trouble even saying – I think it was Ali Marpet that I spoke to, but I don't want to say a name to this quote. But early in the 2020 season, I just don't want to say – I guarantee it came from Ali Marpet. I don't remember who exactly I spoke to. Early in the 2020 season, when I had noticed how much more duo blocking and zone blocking they were doing under Arians' offense. And I went to one of them and I said, what's been the biggest difference in this playbook? And they said that coming from George Warhop to this coaching staff, the playbook and what the offensive linemen are asked to do has shrunk. I mean, just so much. He goes, the playbook, what we are asked to do is so much smaller. And I think that like we said, continuity, it's easier. And I think that's a huge assistance. I mean, Tristan Wirfs came in and he said that at Iowa, he didn't have a lot of vertical pass sets. Coming into Tampa, that's a lot of what they do. So on top of learning all of this, you're coming into the league. It's brand new. You don't have a training camp. When you come into a coaching staff that is going to say, this is what we do. We're going to make it simple for you. We're going to make this unit do what they do best and not ask them to do a million different things but that's, I think, a huge assistance for him coming in.
No, I don't think there's any doubt about it. And, you can't overlook the fact that he's just a talented guy. I mean, he's just an athletic guy that has all the skill sets that you want in a tackle. Now, I've mentioned it before. I remember before the season started when he was kind of I'm not really a violent guy and I don't really get angry and things like that. And I just put my hand on my head and said, no. I like the Ryan Jensen. Let's go, get in a fist fight between plays. And that's just not Tristan Wirfs. But I was wrong. I mean, you can be a nice guy off the field and be one hell of an offensive lineman when we saw that. And, we just mentioned DeMar Dotson. He was like that. DeMar Dotson, you're not going to find a nicer guy to hang out with or
Ali
talk.
Marpet, too. Ali Marpet's another guy that's very nice.
Soft-spoken, nice.
Right.
It's all about switching that gear, and not everyone can do it. Not everyone can flip the switch. Mm-hmm. I think Ndamukong Suh is a guy like that too, because you see him off the field and he's kind of soft spoken and very easygoing, stuff like that. And then on the field, obviously he dominates from the interior defensive line. So some athletes are just really able to have it. It's quite a fascinating study when you look into the mental psyche of players and things like that. But yeah, Wirfs is obviously a guy that's able to. He's putting on a good name for the quote-unquote nice guys in the NFL. Yeah,
for sure. If the Bucs had to choose between Smith and Jensen for 2022 for an extension, who would they pick? I would not be shocked to see the Buccaneers extend Donovan Smith. This year. I mean, I think that, look, I know, and I've said this before again on the podcast and even written it, that this organization thinks a lot higher of Donovan Smith than a lot of the media do, and particularly the fans do. They thought a lot of him when they re-signed him 3 years ago to that extension, or 2 years ago, whatever it was, and they still think very highly of him. And when you start looking at a team that wants more cap room to bring guys back, sometimes adding these extensions or offering guys extensions on their contract pushes money around a little bit, that opens up cap money for this particular year. So it could be a win-win for the Buccaneers, where they could lock Donovan Smith up. And look, the price of left tackles is only going to go up, and it's going to go up tremendously next year when that salary cap makes that big jump. If this is, this might be the year to do it. Now, Donovan's agent may be saying there's no way in hell we're going to do it this year. We're going to play this thing out, and we're going to break the bank, because he absolutely, as a free agent, if he were to make it to free agency, whether we think he's a top 5 guy, he's going to get top 5 money out on the free agent market. So it wouldn't shock me to see the Buccaneers trying to extend him this year. Jensen, I don't know. I mean, they could at least rework his deal a little bit. Add some more time on there too to save some money. I'm not sure what they're going to do there. It's been pretty quiet, to be honest with you, with our sources. Part of that obviously is the fact that we can't go have a secret lunch with these guys. We can't, we're not going to bump into them at the halls at one Buccaneer place, right? I mean, it's tough right now.
We're not sitting down in Mobile.
That's another thing. We're not having these little scoop sessions and things like that to get stuff off the record. But we're digging, that's for sure. Aunt Cam, I'm not sure what that means, but man, we appreciate you. A $50 super chat. Absolutely. Is that right? Is that what I'm reading? Fire
$50.
Cannons. Man, that's huge, dude. We really, really appreciate that. And I agree. Let's fire those cannons again another year, because it was a heck of a fun ride to see those cannons finally fire at the end of the Super Bowl. They didn't fire during the game, but they did fire after the game. So let's see that happen again. But thank you for that donation. Ray Liotta, didn't realize that the famous Hollywood actor was a Buccaneer fan, but it's good to see that, Ray. Thank you. Think we will go after... Great movie. Think we go after Van Noy if we lose Shaq Barrett. They'll go after somebody if they lose Shaq Barrett. I don't know who it's going to be. I don't even know what kind of money that Van Noy might command. But guys, they've got to have a contingency plan if Shaq ends up walking, because he's not going to be the tagged guy this year, I don't think. I mean, I think we all agree Chris Godwin makes the most sense for this team to be tagged, and Shaq's going to be out there. Again, the only good news for the Buccaneers is there's not a ton of teams with a lot of money to spend. The Buccaneers, who we're talking about trying to create more money to keep guys, have the 7th or the 6th most cap room heading into free agency this year. So, but there's a lot of teams. Obviously, there's a ton of teams worse off than the Buccaneers. So there's not a ton of money floating around out there where Shaq Barrett, who said he would like to break the bank, is maybe going to break the bank, but we'll just kind of see what happens. I've said this, and I don't know what you guys think about this. I'll get your thoughts on this. They were, really up until the playoffs, I was thinking to myself, there's no way you re-sign Shaq Barrett for $16, $17, $18 million, because while I believe he led the NFL in pressures with 77, his sack numbers were down more than half from what he had last year, obviously 19.5 in 2019. But I was thinking there's no way. But boy, he really showed what he could do in the playoffs and how important it is to have that edge rusher. Problem is, if you do let the guy walk or even let him get out there in free agency, run the risk of losing him, there's not anybody behind him. Anthony Nelson? Anybody scared of Anthony Nelson? Great kid. Maybe he develops.
Cam Gill
disrespecting
had a sack in the
Super Bowl sack getter Cam Gill. Yeah, and that's the problem is, I think
he's unproven this season. I mean, he's unproven. At least Shaq had a few years in Denver, right? I mean, he had a resume. You're talking about Anthony Nelson and Cam Gill. They just don't have resumes. There's no production on that resume.
And Anthony Nelson is really, from what we've seen, he's just a guy. And I think that Shaq came in and had 19.5 sacks and set the franchise record, and everybody said lock him up, and that would have been the dumbest thing the Bucs could have ever done, because they're going to pay him top 3 edge rusher money if they sign him last offseason, especially with Rosenhaus as his agent. It's not like he's going to go out there and say, yeah, I'll go, play for half price coming off 19.5 sacks. I said it last year. I said it's the dumbest thing they could do, because you're paying a guy who's in his 6th or 7th season now, who's had 1 year as a starter, elite money. And granted, like you said, for much of the year, Shaq Barrett was a good player. I think he's an above average edge rusher, and I think there's a lot of value in that in the NFL, especially when you look at what they have behind him in Anthony Nelson, in Cam Gill, in Pat O'Connor. But the hardest pill to swallow for the Bucs if they lose him is not just losing what Shaq brings. It's trying to find, okay, what are we going to do now?
Yeah.
Because it's not just Shaq Barrett. I mean, Jason Pierre-Paul is getting older. So all of a sudden in the next year or two, you're going to be replacing 2 edge rushers. And it's just so hard to do that in this league. It's so hard.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like left tackle.
Look how long it took the Buccaneers to find these 2 guys, right? I mean, let's go back to the Daquan Bowers days and the Adrian Claiborne days. And, there were guys that were signing off the street back, in 2013,
Michael Johnson.
14, 15, 16 that, people never even heard of, and they're signing them off the street. And the next thing you know, they're in the game. Noah Spence is getting drafted, and it's just so hard to find quality guys. And so when you've got one on the roster and an opportunity to keep him, you've got to figure out a way to do that if you're Jason Light.
Yeah, remember, Jason Pierre-Paul was the first Bucs defender to get double-digit sacks since Simeon Rice did it over a decade ago. So, the Bucs went through a ton of pass rushers. It's funny. I kind of think of, remember when the parade happened and Shaq gets on stage and he's like, I'm coming back. I could just picture Rosenhaus slam the table like, damn it. Like, you're ruining all my negotiating tactics right now. Yeah. And to go back to what you said, Mark, about that Shaq Barrett turned it on later in the regular season, I would even say that Shaq's, I don't want to say coming out party because last season was his coming out party, but when we really were like, oh, Shaq is back, was the NFC Championship game when he had the 3 sacks against Green Bay, and then obviously he went wild in the Super Bowl as well. Now, those were the 2 games where Vita Vea came back. I'm not saying that's directly affiliated on the same line of Vita Vea comes back and all of a sudden Shaq Barrett.
It didn't hurt. That's for sure.
That we wanted to see, and so it's interesting because.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, you talk about that. That's a great point about the Vita Vea thing. And it's been made before, but I don't think it could be underestimated. Vita Vea helped everybody on that defensive line.
Oh, massively.
We all love Nacho. We all love Steve McLendon. He did great in his role. But Vita Vea is such a unique football player. And that's why I was banging the table for the Buccaneers to not draft Derwin James.
As we all know.
Straight face. Yeah, I mean, I was like, you don't need a safety. What you need is this amazing nose tackle in Vita Vea. Okay, we all know that wasn't true. But, again, reason 644, I'm not a general manager in the NFL because I would have taken Derwin James. And that's not to say Derwin James wouldn't have been an impactful player for this football team, but I was really sleeping on Vita Vea because he's been everything the Buccaneers have asked and more. And here's the thing, guys. There's more left for him to learn. He's still got a ceiling, and he's not even. I don't think he's anywhere near where he can be as a football player when he finally figures out how damn dominating he could be. Shaq Barrett, while he can get a ton of money to go to Jacksonville and a couple of these other teams that have a lot of money, the Jets or another team, that could spend some money. You have to look, if you're a football player, who are my teammates? Who are the other 3 or 4 guys? Whatever kind of front you have, who are these other guys that I'm going to be lining up against? Because we saw without Vita Vea, Shaq Barrett put up pedestrian numbers. Again, you can't discount pressures, but I'm like Scott Reynolds when it comes to this. Pressure is all well and good, but getting a guy on his ass is what it's all about in my terms. I mean, you get a guy down, I mean, that's demoralizing to an offensive line and to an offense. Pressure, a lot of people don't even really notice that. Okay, it's an incomplete pass or the guy had to check it down. But when you take a guy down, I mean, that just lifts both offensively and defensively, both those units. It gets them fired up. I mean, you need guys to get sacks. Pressures are great, but sacks are golden. And I hope that, when Shaq Barrett looks at some of the money that may get thrown his way, if the Buccaneers don't get a chance to get him re-signed before free agency opens, that he does keep that in mind because, again.
And I think that another thing is, that if you sorry to cut you off, but if you say that Shaq is pedestrian without Vita Vea, I think, okay, well, what is somebody else who's worse than Shaq without Vita Vea? You don't expect Vita Vea to be hurt for 9 or 10 weeks next season. You hope. I mean, anything could happen, but you hope that he's going to be healthy for a majority, if not all of the season. And if Shaq is great with Vita Vea in the lineup and you expect Vita Vea to be in the lineup, then you've got yourself a great edge rusher.
And
Now, I
that-
know obviously you don't want to pay him $20 million a year,
Yeah.
but if you can afford him, you bring him back because he is an above average edge defender. He's not top 5, but he's pretty good. And that's hard to find.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Matt. Let me just say this. I mean,
Yeah.
when you're talking about Vita Vea helping protect Shaq Barrett, essentially, right? I mean, that's what he's doing. He made Shaq Barrett better. You know, we've got to think about our protection, guys. And you know why? Because hurricane season is coming up very soon. Hurricane season has been devastating the last few years in the country. Luckily, here in the Tampa Bay area, we've dodged some bullets, but we've had some residual storms or some residual effects from storms that you want to make sure that you're protected. I am protected by Briar Greaves. They handle my homeowner's insurance. Guess what? I had a claim from a no-name windstorm back in December that took a tree down on an exterior building that I had. I wasn't sure if I wanted to make the claim. Briar Greaves, he and I were talking one day. He said, why don't you have an adjuster come out and take a look at it? Ended up, there was a lot more structural damage than I had any idea there. And it was actually a dangerous situation because there was electric and water also hooked to that building. And if it comes down, who knows what happens? Certainly a fire could easily happen. So we ended up filing the claim. It was simple. Briar got me in touch with the right person, filled out the form online. The adjuster was out a couple days later. And within 10 days, I received a check in the mail to cover exactly what I need to replace this building. So if you have property, if you drive an automobile, if you have a life, then you need insurance. If you rent, you need insurance. No one listening right now, not a single person listening to this right now doesn't need some form of insurance. We need you to go to our sponsors. We need you to go to briargreaves.com. We need you to give them a call. Give Sam, give Briar a call at your convenience, but let them know you heard about it on the Pewter Report podcast. And even if you've got coverage or you feel like you've got coverage, why not have Briar or Sam take a look at what you currently have and see if they can save you money? Because you're going to feel really, really dumb if you've been overpaying for your homeowner's insurance by, I don't know, $500, $1,000 a year for the last 5 years. Think about the money that you could save. And you know what? Briar and Sam, they're good guys. If they can't help you, if they can't save any money, they're going to tell you straight up, you know what? You're okay with your current carrier. I wouldn't rock the boat. Stay where you are. That's the kind of guys they are. Big Buccaneer fans. Briar Greaves, located in Tampa off of Henderson. I will give you the phone number in just a second. I should be a little bit more prepared for that. But anyway, I've got it right here now. Anyway, give them a call. Area code 813-876-4166, 813-876-4166. And even if you, have got everything taken care of on your personal lines, they handle commercial too. If you own a business, you've got to be protected for your liability, for your employees, and things like that. Briar Greaves, there's not a type of insurance they can't handle for you. And they're licensed to do business all over. Give them a call. 813-876-4166. Do it now. Well, in about 15 minutes when this podcast is over. Anyway, that's it. No more reads. We can just talk football for the last 15
Actually,
minutes.
no, go do it now. So you have to go and re-listen to the podcast to catch the last few minutes.
Yeah, then we got, double downloads. Yeah. I like that, or double views. I had a question up real quick earlier, and here it is. I'm going to put it back up now. This is something that's disturbing to me. This is disturbing. Mike Garafolo, I call him Garafolo, but that's not how you say his name.
Garafolo.
Mike Garafolo, Janine's brother, just kidding, they're not related, says the sense around the league is Lavonte David signs elsewhere. And we heard the reports by, I think it was in Cleveland with Mary Jo, who reported that the Browns have a strong interest in bringing Lavonte David in. I've said to myself, of all the free agents, this is the guy that there's no way the Glazers let him walk out of the building. He has to retire as a Buccaneer. But these rumblings are coming from somewhere. There's going to be strong interest for Lavonte David out there. And the Buccaneers, they may have a decision to make, guys. And that decision is, we can pay him, 10, 11, maybe 12 million. But if a team throws 16, 17, 18 million dollars at the guy, what do you do, man, if you're Jason Light at that point? And what do you do if you're Lavonte David? I mean, it's hard. I mean, if you're talking $1 or $2 million, that's still a lot of money. especially to the three of us, but even to an NFL player. But I mean, if you're throwing an extra $5 or $6 million guaranteed over 2 or 3 years, and so that turns into an extra $20 million, that would be hard to walk away from, even if you had to leave Tampa Bay, even though it's been where you've played all along. But what do you do if you're the Buccaneers? Is this another Quan Alexander situation the Buccaneers might be facing?
It's really tough. Go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say, well, we had that PR roundtable last Saturday where we said like which free agent was most important, and I picked Lavonte David because Lavonte David is just one of those.
Wait! You didn't pick Ryan Suckup? I
did not pick Ryan.
You didn't?
You didn't pick Jaden Mickens?
Cross my mind, but
no Cyril Grayson.
He just missed the cut. It was like Lavonte David, Chris Godwin, Cyril Grayson. It was like it was a very, he won the bronze medal if this was the Olympics.
By the way, spoiler alert, if you haven't read the article, Scott Reynolds picked Ryan Suckup. But anyway, go ahead. Read the article. He makes a good point. But anyway.
Read the article while listening to this podcast. You can multitask.
And calling Briar Greaves.
Yeah, exactly.
And
maybe
throwing
have
throwing fat donations in the super chat.
And don't forget to chug a Celsius while you do it.
Right. So quadruple and
all right, all bases covered.
Yeah.
And you can manscape later.
Tasking?
Quintuple, I believe.
All right, quintuple tasking.
Yeah.
But anyway, when you look at Lavonte David, that is just a guy that you think he is a Bucs lifer. This guy will only play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If there
has to be, though.
If there's an alternate universe of where Lavonte David is playing for another NFL team that isn't the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I do not want to be a part of that universe. It's just like, and I understand what you're saying. Like, if a team throws out $17 million, you have to take it at that point. It's just not believable. It's just, it's unthinkable that Lavonte David will play anywhere else. And you know what? I don't envy Jason Light and the ownership for having to make a decision like that, because it's different than Quan, because like Lavonte has been there for so long, and it's tough too because
Lavante's better than Quan.
Well, yeah,
like by a lot.
And to go back to the parade again, Lavonte brought up himself like, I was on a 2-win team, I was on all these bad teams, I thought about leaving but I stayed, and then it paid off. And it's like an interesting situation because at the end of the day, it's a business and you got to negotiate. So Lavonte will say, oh, well, I was with it through the hard times. And in a perfect world, yes, you would want to reward a guy for like staying with the team through the hard times. And then they win the Super Bowl like they did. But we don't live in a perfect world. And the Bucs might be like, well, we got to start thinking about our future. It's a situation that I would hate to be in if I'm Jason Light.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, and it's another tough thing because, I mean, he's 31 years old and he was really good this season. I mean, I would go as far. I know Devin White is getting all the attention because he came in and he's new and he's young and he runs a 4.4 some odd 40, and the Bucs won the Super Bowl. But I think he was better than it had 9 sacks. I think he was better as an off-ball linebacker. I think he was better than Devin White. There was a point where John was writing Devin White's at his best when he's just blitzing and he's a liability in coverage, which he was for most of the season. I'm not saying a lot of that won't improve. But like Lavonte David is still one of your best players. It's like a Jason Pierre-Paul situation where it's like he's getting older. He's on the tail end of his career. Do you want to be paying exorbitant amounts of money for him with a contract that's going to pay him through 34, through 35 years old? But at the same time, if you lose him, now you have to replace him. What do the Bucs do next year? You going to run Jack Sitchie out there?
Yeah,
I mean,
he'll get hurt. No offense to Jack Sitchie, but he always gets hurt. So,
guess what? If you lose Lavonte David, and Kevin Mentor's also a free agent, now all of a sudden linebacker becomes a huge need in the offseason, particularly in the draft. And again, John and Scott can talk a little bit more with more authority on the draft crop of linebackers this year. But you're not going to find a Lavonte David, a guy that's going to be able to step in and do what Lavonte David did in the draft this year, not when you're picking number 32. So I think that would be a huge weakness if Lavonte David were to walk from this football team. Somebody asked Mike Gizzy says, how is it that J.J. Watt can sign a deal when free agent hasn't even started yet? Well, he was released by the Texans, and so technically he becomes a free agent when he cleared waivers. I think that's how it worked. Anyway, they agreed to to terminate whatever the contract was. So a little bit different in that situation. How surprised, and I know that Scott and John talked about this on Monday, but how surprised were you guys with the money that he got and the fact that he signed with Arizona of all teams?
I'm not extremely surprised with the money he got. I think that even last year on a really, really bad defense, he was good. And like we've been talking about all day, edge rushing is a premium position. He's a 3-time player of the year. I don't think he's over the hill. I think he has a little bit of an injury history, but when he's on the field and when he's healthy, he's still, wreaking havoc. He's variable. You can put him outside. You can move him interior where he's arguably his best. Vance Joseph, who's the defensive coordinator in Arizona now, was an assistant back in J.J. Watt, one of his best years. I forgot if it was second year, third year. So a lot of things fit well. I just thought that he wanted to go to a contender. And that's what surprised me the most. I'm not saying the Cardinals aren't a good team, because I know that's what Twitter does. They say, if I say, they're not a contender, it means they're not good. They're good. They're an 8-8 team, maybe a 9-7 team, could just as easily be a 7-9 team. But they're not a team that I'm expecting, especially in that division. If the Seahawks keep Russ, they're probably still above the Cardinals. The Rams have gotten better. They're still above the Cardinals. The 49ers, if they're healthy, are probably still above the Cardinals. The Cardinals could be a good team and still land last in one of the best divisions in football. I don't think they're going to be making a run at a Super Bowl in the next 2 seasons. Not saying they might not be there in the next 5.
Yeah, and certainly they're not going to do it just because they added J.J. Watt to the mix. I mean, here's a guy that, again, he's probably better than his stats showed last year. I think he had 5 sacks last year. And they're talking about teaming him up with Chandler Jones and this amazing combo. And they will make each other better if Chandler Jones is healthy this year. I think he only played in a couple games last year, just had 1 sack. Of course, he really has been a dominant guy the few years before that. But
you can't tell me that a better suited team wasn't willing, because I heard the Cardinals, the rumor was they weren't even offering him the highest offer. So it wasn't even just, they gave me the biggest paycheck and I win.
Wow.
I think they were second or third, if the rumor is true, in money offered. So I guess maybe that was kind of that mix of they could be competitive if things fall right, and they gave me a certain number, a certain amount. But
right.
I heard 14 million was
the money doesn't surprise me. I think it's more, listen, there's no such thing as like a sure thing in the NFL. We obviously know any given Sunday, but I really thought Buffalo would have been such a good place for J.J. Watt.
Buffalo,
where it's
Green Bay, Tampa.
Yeah, so I thought
Tampa.
Buffalo and Green Bay would be the 2 good ones, because Buffalo, they're clearly the favorite in the AFC East, and the second best team in the AFC East still, there's a gap between those 2. And Wisconsin, Green Bay would make
even
sense.
Cleveland.
He's a Wisconsin guy, and
Right.
obviously they just went to 2 straight NFC Championship games.
Nathan Elliott says, can we bring the discussion back to the Bucs? Well, in a
You're
roundabout way that it is, because we're talking about free agency, the money that people are getting, and the money that J.J. Watt gets is going to affect the money that Shaq Barrett gets. If J.J. Watt with 5 sacks is commanding $16 million a year, what is Shaq Barrett going to command when he gets out on the open market? Certainly more than J.J. Watt. I mean, J.J. Watt, probably some of that money was earned on reputation versus production, but situational wise, he's going to be in a good position, I think, in Arizona. But Shaq Barrett loved that, right? Drew Rosenhaus loved to see the money that J.J. Watt got, because that just increases the money that Shaq Barrett is going to get, either from the Buccaneers or another football team. The Red Pearl earlier said that Lavonte David takes priority over Godwin and definitely Barrett. Godwin is a guy that I keep saying is such a crucial part of this offense. And I think we've got to read kind of between the lines of what Bruce Arians said when we had him and Jason Light on last week about Chris Godwin. I mean, he was fawning all over him, and not like, he's just a great player, knows a lot of things. He talked about the unique things that Chris Godwin does. There's not another receiver on this roster. I heard somebody say, well, Adam Humphries got cut by Tennessee. Bring him back and he can be Chris Godwin. Absolutely not. I mean,
No.
beside the fact that the Titans paid a ton of money for Adam Humphries that the Buccaneers weren't able to afford, he would not have fit that role that Chris Godwin does, because he's not physical enough to play inside in the slot. That guy, the things that Godwin is required to do, are very unselfish things from a receiver. I mean, he could be a guy that screams, "No, I don't want to get dirty. I don't want to get dirty here. I just want to play on the outside." He's willing to play all over the field, and particularly in the slot. And that's a crucial position for this Buccaneer offense and a Bruce Arians offense. Not everybody can just step into that role. People say, "Oh, there's Scotty Miller," but again, Scotty Miller is not going to fill the Chris Godwin role. He might fill the AB role if AB walks, which I'm thinking is probably going to happen, but he's not going to fill that
Scotty
Chris
Miller
Godwin
is what
role.
the Bucs wanted Deshaun Jackson to be. He's essentially
Yeah.
he's got
Good
one
point.
role. Like, he does that role really well, but like, he runs 9 routes. That's what he does. He might make a play on a few things. Chris Godwin, I mean, I don't want to disrespect Mike Evans. He's obviously phenomenal. First player with 7,000-yard season to start his career. But Chris Godwin could make a very good case for the best wide receiver on this team. I know people are going to disagree with me, but Chris Godwin is really good. He's really versatile. He does a lot of things. He dropped more balls in the playoffs, I know, than he ever has in a season in his career. But,
Right.
I mean, that's a couple games. We can't hold anything. I mean, you can hold it against him all you want, but it doesn't make him any less of a player over the last 4 years. Chris Godwin is a number one on a lot of teams.
Yeah,
And who can do a lot of things.
he's absolutely a number one receiver on a lot of NFL teams in this league. I would go as far to say as well too that Chris Godwin is the most consistent receiver that the Bucs have. He's just a
Yes,
locomotive.
he's the
Like,
chain
you can
mover
already-
on this
You
team
can
with
already
Brady.
pencil him in for like 5 catches and 75 yards on like a pedestrian game.
Yeah.
And I think obviously Godwin should be back. It's very important that he is back for this team. If I were going to argue the other side, and all I'm going to say is my stance is Chris Godwin should be back. He pretty much needs to be back. But if I was going to play devil's advocate and argue for the other side, I would say that you can look at the Super Bowl. Mike Evans, he drew like 1,000 penalties, but he had 1 catch in the game.
Yeah.
Godwin had 2 receptions for like 5 or 10 yards. So the Bucs just have so many weapons. As long as they have Tom Brady, they have so many weapons and good players that Brady can distribute the ball to, that if they had to pay money to other guys like Shaq Barrett, like Ndamukong Suh, and there just wasn't enough money left for a guy like Chris Godwin, that the Bucs would be able to get around it. I don't know.
It's not like you're leaving the team without a number one receiver. You still have a Mike Evans who had 10, 11 touchdowns this year. It's like you're losing a really, really important piece, and I've said it a million times this season. Mike Evans is probably the best wide receiver on this team, but Chris Godwin is going to be the most consistent guy, like you said, Matt. He's the guy that moves them down the field. He's the guy that keeps things going. He's, we saw Cam Brate make some nice third down catches, some important ones. Scotty Miller had a great one in the playoffs, Tyler Johnson, but Godwin is the perfect go-to guy for Tom Brady in this offense. And he's the guy that keeps, but again, if you have to lose him, it's not like the Bucs just aren't going to add another wide receiver. It's not like they're going to be stuck with Tyler Johnson and Scotty Miller behind Mike Evans, but you already have number one. Yeah, so it wouldn't be catastrophic if you lose him, but it would be a huge hit because you're obviously losing an extremely talented player.
I mean, great point about the Super Bowl, and it's been brought up a little bit before on Twitter. I saw it. If somebody would have told you Mike Evans has 1 catch, Chris Godwin has 2 catches, and the Buccaneers scored 31 points, you would have said you're crazy, right, against the Chiefs. But that's exactly what they did, and that just proves how good of an offense this was. Obviously, the defense was key, and if you want to take a look at it, I've been one of those guys that grew up as a defensive-minded guy, played more defense, in my very poor playing days at Plant City High School.
Pinecrest, baby.
With Pinecrest, you played both ways and special teams because we only had about 13 guys on the whole team. So, and if your dad's the coach, you weren't coming off the field for anything. So, but my point is I've kind of shifted that, you can just score enough points to outscore teams. The Buccaneers really proved that theory a little bit wrong this year. The defense still wins championships because, to hold 9 points, hold the Chiefs to 9 points. I'm still, that's probably the most baffling thing when I think about this entire year is that the Buccaneers held Patrick Mahomes and that Chiefs offense to 9 points in the Super Bowl. Just tremendous. And I've watched the game a couple of times since then, the TV broadcast. I was in the stadium and saw it firsthand. I've seen all the little recap things. By the way, if you haven't seen it, Showtime, if you don't have Showtime, their weekly program, what's it called? This is the NFL, or this is full, I don't know what it's called.
Inside the NFL.
Inside the NFL. they've put that segment out that you normally pay for out on YouTube for everybody to see, and it is a really, really good look. And to have the host kind of break up and give their discussions, Michael Irvin gets involved. Of course, Phil Simms is there, JB. So it's really a really good hour-long program. If you need something tonight to watch and you need that football fix, I thought it was a really good perspective to see the Showtime crew talk about that. But again, to hold that team to 9 points. And Ray Lewis is on there, and he's like, Ray Lewis is always going to scream defense first. And he's right, because he was part of a team that won a Super Bowl because their defense was so good. Dragon Loeb says, if the Bucs lose David, will Mark Cook cry? I will have moist eyes. I don't know if a tear actually falls. Now, the day that Mike Evans leaves this football team, Mark Cook will cry, whether it's via retirement, whether it's, he gets cut, which I don't think that'll ever happen. But if the day that Mike Evans leaves, that's the day that Mark Cook will cry. Go on record saying for the current Buccaneers, Mike Evans is Mark Cook's favorite player. Great guy, great football player. Guys, we've almost made 50 minutes. We were going to go kind of short, but we've had some great questions in the chat. Is there anything else you guys want to throw out there real quick? I just want to remind everybody, first and foremost, please continue to follow us at pewterreport.com, where we have free agency previews. The offensive line is up now. Also, John Ledger did the tight ends, wide receivers. We kind of combined that group. We've got best bets for that, so make sure to check that out on pewterreport.com. Behind enemy lines, where I take a look at all of the NFC South opponents, what they're doing of the Buccaneers. That article will be going up here shortly, so eat dinner, click on it, read the article. We've got tons of other great stuff we've already had this week. We'll have more great stuff throughout the week. And we want to thank you guys, not just for the numbers that we're putting up on this podcast, but our web traffic has just been through the roof. I mean, we are just so far ahead of last year's pace, which last year was a record-setting time. If you own a business, if you work for a business, and you'd like exposure, I'm talking about millions of impressions every single month, give us a call. Email us at pewterreport.com. Scott, John, myself, Matt, Taylor, it doesn't matter. Any of us will help you out because, we can get you exposure. We've got the numbers, the Google Analytics to prove it, and just for a fraction of what it costs for traditional advertising. So make sure, even if you don't own the business, maybe you work for a company, go to your boss and say, hey, have Mark give you a call. Let Mark come by and show you some information. Let's do that because, COVID has hit us fairly hard. We're recovering slowly but surely, like the rest of the state of Florida. But we need that boost, that kick in the pants, and you guys can help us out with that. So we certainly would appreciate that. And again, get in touch with Scott, myself, John, Matt, Taylor. It doesn't matter. Whoever you like the best, throw us some business, and we'll hook you up, man. Yeah, I'll tell you what. If I get a deal because you refer it, anybody out there, you will get a case of Celsius, your choice of flavors, man. I'm just going to throw that out there right now, and I'm pretty sure Matt, Taylor, Scott, and John would say the same thing too. And if you get Taylor a gig, you can babysit his cat for a night.
You can babysit Dewey. One night only.
Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. That's my favorite law firm from the Three Stooges. Anyway.
We call him Dewey Lewis in the news.
All right, Matt, anything else? Is that it for you? Were you good?
Yeah, I'm good. I was just clicking on some comments that other people had. Not really questions, but a lot of people defending Mike Evans. So,
Hello, who's Courtney? Has Courtney been on before? But Mark, did you get a new camera? I did not get a new camera, but what I did is because it's daylight, I actually turned the light off in the room and just opened up the window to see if maybe that would help a little bit as well. And I wipe the tobacco juice off of the camera every once in a while. I got to do that too because I tend to slobber when I'm talking. But thank you, Courtney, for noticing that. I don't know if that's a good thing if we see me more clearly. But anyway, guys, I appreciate it, Matt. Taylor, Dewey, Mark, for the suspended Scott and John. We'll be back tomorrow at 4:00 with another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out. Deuces. Tyree Hill. Suck it.